Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional legal, financial, or psychological advice. Divorce laws vary significantly by state and jurisdiction, and the emotional complexities of family restructuring require personalized attention from qualified professionals. Please conduct your own due diligence and consult with a licensed attorney or certified counselor regarding your specific situation. The American dream, as it was sold to your father and your grandfather, is officially dead. For decades, the roadmap was simple: education, career, marriage, and a suburban home with a white picket fence. But as we sit here in 2026, the statistics tell a different, much more jarring story. In the United States, nearly 50% of marriages still end in dissolution, but the demographic profile of who is leaving and why has shifted under our feet. Specifically for men, the landscape of divorce has transformed from a legal hurdle into a total cultural and identity-based reconstruction. There is a silent epidemic sweeping across America, one where men who did everything they were told to do, the providers, the workers, the protectors, are finding themselves in their 40s and 50s sitting in empty apartments, wondering how the social contract they signed 20 years ago suddenly became null and void. This is not just about a breakup. This is about a fundamental shift in how the U.S. legal system, the American economy, and our modern social fabric view the role of the husband and father. We are entering an era where the gray divorce rate has tripled, where the loneliness epidemic is disproportionately claiming the mental health of divorced males, and where the financial cost of uncoupling has reached a point where it can reset a man's retirement clock by 15 years or more. If you are watching this, you might be feeling the pressure of a shifting household dynamic, or perhaps you are already navigating the complex waters of a legal separation. Today, we are opening the book on the deep dive masterclass into cultural shifts and divorced men in America. Over the course of this series, we are going to deconstruct the exact mechanisms that lead to this point, the historical trends that explain why your marriage looks different than your parents', and the case studies of men who have successfully navigated the fallout to build a more resilient second act. By the end of this first part, you will understand the three core cultural pillars that have collapsed in the last decade, and why the default settings for being a man in America no longer provide the security they once did. To understand where we are, we have to look at the historical trend of the provider paradox. For nearly a century, a man's value in the American family unit was tied almost exclusively to his utility as a breadwinner. This was a stable, albeit rigid, social contract. However, as of 2026, we see that in nearly 45% of U.S. households, women are either the primary earners or earn an equal share to their husbands. While this is a milestone for economic equality, it has created a massive identity vacuum for men who were raised with the traditional blueprint. When the financial necessity of a partner is removed, the emotional and domestic expectations increase exponentially. Many men find themselves in a position where they are still working 50-hour weeks to provide, yet they are being told that their provision is no longer the primary currency of a successful marriage. This disconnect is a leading driver in what sociologists call walkaway wife syndrome. But from the male perspective, it feels like the goalposts were moved in the middle of the game. Take the case study of a typical mid-career professional in a city like Charlotte or Austin. He has spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, ensuring the mortgage is paid and the 529 plans for the children are funded. He views this as the ultimate expression of love and commitment. However, the cultural shift has moved toward expressive individualism, where the success of a marriage is measured not by stability, but by personal fulfillment and emotional resonance. If the emotional connection isn't maintained at a high level, the stability the man provides is no longer seen as a reason to stay. This creates a high-stakes environment where the legal and financial risks of divorce remain tethered to old-world standards, while the reasons for leaving have shifted to new-world expectations. Furthermore, we must address the legal lag. While culture moves at the speed of the internet, the U.S. family court system often moves at the speed of a 1980s typewriter. Even as the stay-at-home dad becomes more common and dual-income households become the norm, the default outcomes in many states still lean toward outdated gender roles when it comes to alimony and custody. Men in America today are facing a system that often still views them as the secondary parent, despite the fact that modern fathers are more involved in daily child-rearing than any generation in history. The psychological impact of fighting for 50-50 custody in a system that sometimes feels biased can lead to a level of stress that affects career performance, health, and future relationship potential. We also have to look at the digital transformation of social connection. In 2026, The paradox of choice driven by social media and dating algorithms has altered the way couples view long-term commitment. The grass is greener effect is no longer a localized phenomenon. It is a global 24/7 digital feed. This has led to a decrease in the threshold of boredom within American marriages. Men are often caught off guard by this shift, assuming that as long as there is no major conflict, the marriage is secure. In reality, the absence of conflict is no longer the metric for a healthy marriage in the eyes of modern culture. The presence of constant, peak-level engagement is. This masterclass is designed to solve the problem of the blind side. We are going to provide the data-driven context that allows you to see the landscape clearly, without the fog of emotional turmoil. We will look at why the loneliness epidemic hits divorced men harder, often because men tend to outsource their entire social life to their wives. When the marriage ends, the man's social circle often evaporates, leaving him without a support system at the exact moment he needs it most. We will analyze historical trends in the U.S. economy that make a single-income lifestyle increasingly difficult post-divorce. And we will examine how the self-care movement has been marketed differently to men and women, often leaving men without the tools to process the trauma of a family breakdown. The promise of this deep dive is not to give you a get-out-of-jail-free card or a magic wand. Instead, it is to equip you with a high-level understanding of the sociological forces at play. You are not just experiencing a personal failing. You are navigating a massive structural cultural shift that is affecting millions of men across the country. By understanding the why behind these trends, you can begin to map out a how for your own life. We are going to look at the potential outcomes for those who approach this shift with a growth mindset versus those who fall into the trap of bitterness and stagnation. We will discuss the evolution of no-fault divorce laws and how recent legislative discussions in states like Florida and Texas are attempting to modernize the system to reflect today's economic realities. This is part one of a 10-part journey into the heart of the modern American male experience. We have a lot of ground to cover, from the financial restructuring of your 401k to the psychological rebuilding of your self-worth. Let's get to work. To understand the current state of the American male in the aftermath of a divorce, we must first look at the cold, hard mathematics of the year 2026. We are living in an era where the average cost of a contested divorce in the United States has climbed significantly, often ranging between $15,000 and $30,000 when you factor in legal retainers, expert witnesses, and mediation fees. But the true financial story isn't found in the legal bills. It is found in the structural economic dislocation that occurs the moment two households are forced to emerge from one. Imagine a man named David. David is 46 years old, living in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. He has spent the last 20 years working as a mid-level executive in the logistics industry. In early 2026, David and his wife decided to end their marriage. On paper, David is successful. He earns $140,000 a year. They have a 4-bedroom home with $300,000 in equity and a combined retirement nest egg of $600,000. In the old world, David would be considered financially secure. In the 2026 economy, David is about to face a potential outcome that sociologists call the midlife reset. The first wall David hits is the housing market. Their marital home carries a mortgage interest rate of 3%, a relic from years prior. However, to settle the divorce, they must either sell the home and split the equity, or David must buy out his spouse's share. If he buys her out, he has to refinance that $300,000 of equity at the current 2026 rates, which are hovering near 7%. His monthly housing obligation could effectively double overnight. If they sell, David is forced into a rental market where a 2-bedroom apartment suitable for hosting his children on weekends costs more than his entire previous mortgage for a full house. This is the new American reality. The divorce penalty is amplified by a high-interest, high-rent environment that didn't exist for the previous generation. Historical trends show us that while women often experience a sharper decline in household income immediately following a divorce, men frequently experience a more prolonged struggle with liquid cash flow and long-term asset accumulation. This is largely due to the provider legacy we discussed previously. David finds himself paying child support and potentially spousal maintenance based on his gross income, but his actual cost of living has skyrocketed because he no longer benefits from the economies of scale that come with a dual income or shared expense household. Now let's look at the retirement trap, which is perhaps the most devastating financial shift for men in their 40s and 50s. Most of David's wealth is tied up in his 401k and his home equity. Under the laws of most U.S. states, These are marital assets subject to equitable distribution. Through a Qualified Domestic Relations Order, or QDRO, half of David's retirement savings, $300,000, is transferred to his ex-spouse. To the casual observer, this is simply a fair split. But for David, this represents 20 years of compound interest that is now gone. To replace that $300,000 by the time he reaches age 65, David would need to significantly increase his contributions at a time when his disposable income is at an all-time low due to child support and his new, higher housing costs. In the 2026 financial landscape, the math simply doesn't add up for many men. They face the very real prospect of working 10 years longer than they had planned, not because they want to, but because the structural division of assets during a period of high inflation and market volatility has fundamentally broken their retirement timeline. We must also examine the case study of the shadow costs. Imagine if you had to replace every item in your life tomorrow. When David moves into his new apartment, he realizes he doesn't own a toaster, a set of towels, a lawnmower, or a dining table. The startup cost of a second household in 2026 is a silent killer of male wealth. Estimates suggest that it costs roughly $20,000 just to furnish and equip a basic two-bedroom apartment to a standard that feels like a home for children. For a man already stretched by legal fees, this often leads to a reliance on high-interest credit, creating a debt spiral that can take years to unwind. Historical trends in U.S. family law have begun to move toward a more egalitarian view of alimony, with many states moving away from permanent spousal support in favor of rehabilitative or durational support. However, the calculation of these payments in 2026 often fails to account for the actual purchasing power of the remaining dollar. When a court orders a man to pay 20% of his take-home pay in support, they are calculating based on his income, not his survival needs in an inflated economy. This leads to a phenomenon where men who appear wealthy on a tax return are actually living paycheck to paycheck, a situation that creates immense psychological pressure and a sense of systemic unfairness. Consider the impact on career trajectory. In 2026, the American workforce is more competitive than ever. A man going through a high-conflict divorce is often operating at 60% capacity due to sleep deprivation, legal appointments, and emotional distress. Case studies from corporate HR departments show a correlation between midlife divorce and a plateau in earnings for male employees. The very time David needs to be earning more to cover his new expenses is the time he is most likely to be passed over for a promotion because he is perceived as distracted or less committed to the grind. This economic dislocation is not just about the numbers in a bank account. It is about the loss of the future a man thought he had already paid for. The American male often ties his identity to the stability he provides. When that stability is liquidated through the legal process, the result is a profound identity crisis. He is no longer the provider of the big house. He is the tenant of a small apartment. He is no longer the builder of a 20-year retirement plan. He is a man starting over at zero while his peers are crossing the finish line. The potential outcomes for men in this situation depend heavily on their ability to pivot from a traditional provider mindset to a strategic survivalist mindset. But even the most strategic man is fighting against a cultural shift that has redefined the terms of the contract after the work has already been performed. This is the financial bedrock of the silent epidemic. It is the reason why, in 2026, you see a surge in men seeking out financial coaching specifically tailored to the post-divorce landscape. But the financial hit is only the beginning. While David is staring at his diminished 401k balance, a much more complex and invisible shift is happening in his social world. The house is gone, the money is split, but now the people are starting to disappear too. In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to dive into the phenomenon of social liquidation. We will explore why men's social circles often collapse during a divorce, the reality of the friendship gap, and how the loss of a primary partner often results in total social isolation, in a way that most men never see coming until it is too late. How do you rebuild a tribe when you have lost your home? That is what we are tackling next. The social architecture of the American male is often built on a foundation he doesn't actually own. This is the phenomenon of the social secretary. For the vast majority of married men in the United States, the wife serves as the primary conduit to the outside world. She is the one who schedules the double dates, coordinates the holiday gatherings, maintains the ties with extended family, and keeps the text threads alive with other couples. In 2026, this dynamic has only intensified as the digital labor of maintaining a social presence has become a full-time cognitive load. When a marriage dissolves, a man doesn't just lose his partner. he loses his entire social operating system. Imagine a man named Mark. Mark is a 42-year-old software architect living in the suburbs of Chicago. For 15 years, Mark's social life was a series of prepackaged events. Every Friday night was dinner with the Millers, every Sunday was a barbecue with the neighbors, and every summer was a shared vacation with 2 other families from the local school district. Mark considered these people his best friends. He had been in their homes hundreds of times. He knew their kids' birthdays. He had helped them move furniture and jumpstart cars. But Mark failed to realize a critical historical trend in American social dynamics. He was a member of these groups by proxy. The day the divorce papers were filed, the proxy was revoked. In the year 2026, the speed of social liquidation is staggering. Within 3 months, Mark realized that he hadn't received a single direct text message from any of the husbands in his former circle that wasn't related to the logistics of the divorce. This is not necessarily due to malice. In many U.S. case studies, we see the bystander effect in social circles. Shared friends often feel that reaching out to the husband is an act of betrayal toward the wife, or they simply find the awkwardness of the new dynamic too difficult to navigate. For the Millers and the neighbors, Mark's presence was a function of the couple identity. Once the couple ceased to exist, Mark became a social anomaly. He was a reminder of fragility in a world that prizes the appearance of stability. This leads to what sociologists call the friendship gap. Data from recent years indicates that American men are facing a loneliness epidemic that is twice as severe as that of their female counterparts. While women are socialized to maintain individual, deep-level emotional connections outside of their marriage, many men have been conditioned to view their spouse as their sole emotional outlet. When that outlet is removed, the silence is deafening. Mark found himself sitting in his new 2-bedroom apartment on a Saturday night, staring at a phone that had gone silent. He realized that while he had plenty of acquaintances, he had 0 brothers. He had no one he could call at 2 in the morning to vent about the crushing weight of his new reality. The historical trend of male sociality in America has moved from the communal to the isolated. In the mid-20th century, men had lodges, bowling leagues, and social clubs that provided a secondary support structure independent of the home. By 2026, those physical spaces have largely been replaced by digital interactions that offer the illusion of connection without the substance of support. For a divorced man, a social media feed full of other people's highlight reels acts as a psychological poison, reinforcing the idea that he is the only one who has failed, the only one who is alone. Let's look at the step-by-step decay of the social circle after a U.S. divorce. Step 1 is the immediate withdrawal. Friends wait for the dust to settle, which translates to weeks of silence. Step 2 is the choosing of sides. In a high-conflict divorce, this is explicit. In a low-conflict divorce, it is subtle. The wife often retains the social capital because she has been the one investing the emotional labor into the friendships for years. Step 3 is the loss of the third-party invite. As a single man, Mark is no longer an easy fit for the double-date culture of the suburbs. He is the odd man out, the one who changes the seating chart and the conversation dynamic. The potential outcomes for a man in this position are often grim if not addressed with extreme intentionality. Case studies from U.S. health organizations in 2026 show a direct correlation between this sudden social isolation and a spike in cortisol levels, sleep disorders, and a decline in cardiovascular health. The loneliness isn't just a feeling. It is a physiological stressor that can be as damaging as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Mark's experience is a mirror for millions of American men who find themselves in a state of social bankruptcy. Now imagine the step-by-step process of rebuilding. This is where the cultural shift becomes even more difficult. Making friends as an adult male in 2026 America is a Herculean task. It requires a level of vulnerability that many men were never taught to express. Mark tried to go to a local meetup group, but he felt out of place. He tried to reconnect with college friends, but their lives were thousands of miles away and occupied by their own family obligations. The reality is that for a divorced man, rebuilding a tribe requires a total abandonment of the ego. It requires him to be the one who reaches out, the one who initiates, and the one who admits that he is struggling. The American social fabric has become increasingly fragmented. In 2026, we see a rise in men-only support groups and hobby-based communities, but these are often seen as niche or even controversial. Yet, for men like Mark, these spaces are lifeboats. The case studies of men who successfully navigate the social fallout of divorce are those who realize that they cannot go back to their old life. They cannot force their way back into the couple's circles. They have to build a new, independent social identity. This involves finding men who are in the same boat, men who understand that the white picket fence dream had a hidden cost of social dependency. There is also the factor of the digital footprint. In 2026, your social standing is often tied to your online presence. For a man who has just been through a divorce, his digital history is a graveyard of family photos and shared memories. To move forward, he often has to undergo a digital cleansing, which further alienates him from his past connections. This creates a vacuum of identity. If I am not a husband and I am not a part of that friend group, then who am I? This question of identity is the most dangerous part of the entire process. The loss of money is a hurdle. The loss of friends is a hardship. But the loss of the self is a catastrophe. Many men in Mark's position find that their entire sense of purpose was tied to being the provider and the social anchor for a family that no longer exists in that form. This leads us to a much deeper, much darker territory. We have talked about the bank accounts and the dinner parties, but we haven't talked about the mirror. In the next part of this deep dive, we are going to look at the internal collapse. We will explore the psychological crisis of the American father who has been relegated to a weekend visitor, the impact of the 50-50 custody reality on male mental health, and the shocking data regarding the identity crisis that occurs when a man's primary role is stripped away by a court order. How does a man define himself when the society that told him who to be suddenly takes away his title? We are going into the mind of the divorced man next. The internal landscape of the American man in 2026 is often anchored by a singular, unyielding pillar: his role as the protector and provider of a specific family unit. When a court order effectively dismantles that unit, the psychological fallout is not merely a period of sadness or transition. It is a total structural collapse of the self. In the United States, we have transitioned from a culture where a man was defined by his craft or his community to one where he is almost exclusively defined by his nuclear family. When that family is fractured, the man is left standing in a vacuum of identity, staring into a mirror at a person he no longer recognizes. Imagine a man named James. James is a 41-year-old project manager in Columbus, Ohio. For nearly 2 decades, James's internal clock was set to the rhythm of his household. He woke up at 6 in the morning to the sound of his children getting ready for school. His sense of value was tied to the fact that the roof over their heads was there because of his labor, the food on the table was there because of his planning, and the safety of the perimeter was his personal responsibility. In early 2026, following a standard no-fault divorce, James moved into a sanitized one-bedroom apartment 3 miles away. The first thing that hits James is the silence. In psychological case studies, this is referred to as sensory deprivation trauma. For years, his brain was wired to process constant household stimuli: the hum of the dishwasher, the laughter in the hallway, the presence of another heartbeat in the bed. Now, the silence of his apartment acts as a physical weight. Every time he sees a scuff on the wall he didn't make, or a kitchen counter that remains perfectly clean for 3 days, it serves as a recursive loop reminding him that his primary role has been terminated. He is no longer the chief operating officer of a home. He is a tenant in a box. This leads us to the reality of the 50-50 custody split, which is the gold standard for U.S. family courts in 2026. While on paper this is a victory for fathers' rights, the psychological potential outcomes are far more complex. For James, 50-50 custody means that for 14 days out of the month, he is a ghost in his own children's lives. He misses the small, incremental moments that constitute actual parenting: the frustrated sigh during a math homework session, the scraped knee at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, the quiet conversations that happen while driving to soccer practice. In the 2026 landscape, James has been relegated from a father to a weekend activity coordinator. Historical trends in U.S. sociology show that men who transition into this visitor role often experience a phenomenon known as role exit. When a person's primary social role is removed, they often experience a decline in self-worth that mirrors the symptoms of clinical depression. James finds himself walking through the grocery store, instinctively reaching for the cereal his son likes, only to realize he doesn't have his son this week. This is a micro-trauma, a reminder that his instincts are now obsolete. The system tells him he is an equal parent, but his daily reality tells him he is an optional extra. Furthermore, we must address the identity crisis regarding masculinity in the modern U.S. In 2026, the cultural narrative often focuses on the liberation of the individual, but for many men, their liberation from the family unit feels like a demotion. There is a deep-seated biological and cultural drive to be needed. When a man realizes that his family is functioning, eating, sleeping, and laughing without his physical presence, the internal narrative of the indispensable provider shatters. James looks at his 401k, his career, and his apartment, and asks a question that millions of American men are asking in 2026. If I am not needed here, then why am I working this hard? Data from the last 5 years indicates that this loss of purpose is a primary driver in the declining mental health of divorced males. Without the external pressure of family obligations to keep them grounded, many men drift into a state of functional nihilism. They go to work, they pay their bills, and they maintain their fitness, but the light behind the eyes has gone out because the mission has been compromised. The step-by-step erosion of James's identity begins with the loss of the title of husband, followed by the dilution of the title of father, and ends with the realization that he is now just another unit of labor in the American economy. Consider the case study of the handoff. Every Sunday evening, James meets his ex-spouse in a neutral parking lot to exchange the children. This ritual is perhaps the most dehumanizing aspect of the 2026 divorce experience. It is a logistical transaction of human beings. James watches his children climb into a car that he no longer maintains, headed to a home he no longer protects. He is left standing in a parking lot, often in the fading light of a Sunday evening, with 48 hours of silence ahead of him before he has to return to his corporate job. This transition period is when the psychological risk is at its highest. It is the moment when the reality of his new diminished stature is most undeniable. In the year 2026, we also see the rise of the digital surrogate. James finds himself scrolling through his ex-spouse's social media, looking for glimpses of his children's lives during the weeks he doesn't have them. He sees photos of them at a birthday party he wasn't invited to, or wearing clothes he didn't buy. This digital window into his own family's life, from which he is now excluded, creates a sense of voyeurism that further damages his self-esteem. He is watching a movie of a life he used to star in, but now he isn't even in the credits. This internal collapse is exacerbated by the lack of a male-centric emotional vocabulary in the United States. James was raised to fix problems, not to process existential erasure. He knows how to fix a leaky faucet or a broken server, but he has no tools to fix the fact that his presence is no longer the foundation of his children's world. The potential outcomes for men who do not find a way to pivot their identity are stark. We see a historical trend of men withdrawing from society, reducing their career ambitions, and suffering from a range of stress-related illnesses that the 2026 healthcare system is only beginning to categorize as divorce-related trauma. To survive, James must undergo a total psychological reprogramming. He has to learn to find value in himself that is not dependent on the utility he provides to others. This is an alien concept to the traditional American male. It requires him to build an identity based on personal virtues, hobbies, and a new type of brotherhood that we discussed in the previous part. But the road from the parking lot handoff to a state of self-actualized peace is long, and it is paved with the wreckage of the life he thought he was building. James is currently standing at the edge of a cliff. He has lost his home, his social circle, and now his sense of self. He is a man with no master and no mission. But there is one more factor that is about to enter the equation, something that will force him to face his insecurities in a way he never imagined. Just as James begins to stabilize, he realizes that he is not just a divorced man. He is a single man in the most complex, technologically advanced, and unforgiving dating market in human history. How does a 41-year-old man from Ohio compete in an era of AI-driven dating algorithms and hyper-selective social standards? What happens when James realizes that the world sees him as a used asset rather than a prime candidate? In the next part of this masterclass, we are diving into the digital meat market. We will explore the brutal reality of dating in 2026 for the divorced male, the impact of the dad bod in a world of filters, and the psychological warfare of the swipe-left culture. The battle for James's future is just beginning. The digital dating landscape of 2026 is a far cry from the world James inhabited when he first met his ex-wife in a coffee shop back in 2008. For a divorced man in his 40s, stepping into the modern dating market is less like a walk in the park and more like being dropped into a high-stakes, algorithmic gladiatorial arena. The primary shift that James encounters is the total commoditization of the male persona. In the year 2026, dating apps have evolved from simple matching services into complex social credit ecosystems where every swipe, response time, and profile detail is ingested by a machine learning model to determine his rank in the digital hierarchy. Imagine James sitting in his quiet apartment on a Tuesday night, He downloads the 3 most popular apps in the United States. He uploads a photo of himself at a backyard barbecue from 3 years ago, and a selfie he took in his car. To James, these photos represent who he is: a reliable, hardworking father. To the algorithm of 2026, these photos are a death sentence. Data from recent historical trends suggest that the average user spends less than 2 seconds evaluating a profile. In that window, James is being vetted against a set of hyper-selective criteria that he didn't even know existed. The first concept James has to grapple with is the ELO score of the modern era. In 2026, dating platforms utilize a hidden desirability rating that determines which profiles he is allowed to see, and who is allowed to see him. Because James is starting fresh, has a limited social media footprint, and is using older, non-optimized photos, his initial score is low. This means his profile is buried beneath thousands of others. This is the reality of the digital meat market. If the algorithm doesn't find you relevant, you effectively do not exist. Case studies of men in their 40s show that many experience a total lack of engagement in their first month, leading to a profound sense of invisible rejection that mirrors the social liquidation we discussed earlier. Then comes the specific penalty of the divorce status. While 2026 culture claims to be more accepting, the digital vetting process is brutal. Many women in the high-value dating pool have their filters set to exclude men with children or men who have been previously married, simply as a way to narrow down the overwhelming volume of choices. James finds himself in a catch-22. If he is honest about his children and his past, he is filtered out by 60% of the population before a single word is exchanged. If he hides it, he is viewed as deceptive when the truth inevitably emerges. This creates a psychological warfare where James feels he must apologize for his life experience, a life that he was previously told was his greatest achievement. We must also look at the physical standards of 2026. We are living in an era of peak aesthetic performance. With the rise of accessible health optimization and the ubiquity of high-definition social media, the average 40-year-old man in a U.S. city is expected to have the physique and grooming of a man 10 years his junior. James, with his project manager's schedule and his recent history of stress eating during the legal proceedings, is confronted with the dad bod reality. In a world of filters and AI-enhanced profile pictures, James's authentic, unedited appearance feels like a liability. Historical trends show that men who do not invest heavily in their physical presentation in the 2026 market are often relegated to the bottom tier of the dating stack, regardless of their income, character, or professional success. The step-by-step process of digital rejection is a slow erosion of the ego. Step 1 is the match that never speaks. James finally gets a notification, his heart skips a beat. He sends a thoughtful, respectful message based on her bio, and he is met with total silence. Step 2 is the breadcrumbing. He finds himself in a conversation that lasts for 3 days but never leads to a date. He is a source of entertainment for someone else's bored afternoon. Step 3 is the ghosting. He finally goes on a date, spends $100 on dinner in downtown Columbus, thinks things went well, and then is blocked or ignored without explanation. In the 2026 dating market, the abundance of choice has made human beings disposable. For a man who just lost his primary partnership of 20 years, this level of casual cruelty can be psychologically devastating. Consider the impact of the safety vetting culture. In 2026, U.S. dating apps are often integrated with third-party background check services, and "Are we dating the same guy?" social media groups. James's entire history is potentially subject to public scrutiny by strangers. If his divorce was high conflict, or if there is any digital trail of his past disagreements, he may find himself blacklisted in local dating circles before he even gets a chance to tell his side of the story. The loss of privacy is a major cultural shift that the older generation of divorced men is completely unprepared to handle. Imagine if James tried to pivot to the passport lifestyle, a trend that gained traction in the early 2020s and has become a standardized industry by 2026. He considers looking for partnership outside of the United States, seeking a culture that might value his provider status more traditionally. However, even this path is fraught with new complexities, including shifting global perceptions of the American male and the logistical nightmare of international co-parenting. Every direction James looks, the old rules have been rewritten. The potential outcomes for James in this digital meat market often fall into 2 categories. Some men retreat. They delete the apps, accept a life of solitude, and pour themselves into their work or their children. While this provides peace, it often leads back to the loneliness epidemic we covered. Other men decide to gamify the system. They hire professional photographers, they use AI to write their bios, they spend 3 hours a day in the gym, and they learn the specific linguistic patterns that trigger the algorithm's favor. They become a version of themselves that is optimized for the screen, but often find that the resulting relationships are as shallow as the profiles that created them. The 2026 dating market teaches James a hard lesson. Your value is no longer inherent, it is perceived. It is a world of optics over substance. For a man who built his life on the substance of being a good man, the realization that good is not a searchable filter is a bitter pill to swallow. He realizes that to compete, he has to rebuild not just his life, but his entire external brand. But as James begins to navigate this world of swipes and shadows, he realizes that the problem isn't just the apps. It is his own body. He realizes that the stress of the last 2 years has aged him a decade. He looks at the men who are successful in this new world and realizes they have something he has lost: vitality. He realizes that before he can conquer the digital market, he has to conquer the biological one. This realization leads James toward a path of total physical and physiological restructuring. He begins to see that his body is the only thing he truly owns in the aftermath of the divorce. In the next part of this deep dive, we are exploring the biological reclamation. We will look at the 2026 trends in male health optimization, the reality of revenge physique culture, and the controversial but growing world of TRT and longevity protocols for the divorced American male. James is about to trade his project management spreadsheets for a squat rack and a blood panel. What happens when a man decides to rebuild himself from the cellular level up? We are going into the gym next. James stands at the entrance of a high-performance training center in suburban Ohio, his breath visible in the crisp air of early 2026. This is not the dusty, iron-clanking basement gym of the 1990s. This is a data-driven sanctuary of biological reclamation. For the last 6 months, James has been a passenger in his own life, watching his marriage dissolve, his bank account shrink, and his social circle evaporate. But as he steps onto the black rubberized floor, he realizes that while the courts can take his house and the algorithm can hide his profile, they cannot take his muscle fibers, his bone density, or his metabolic rate. This is the moment the internal collapse meets the physical resistance of the external world. In 2026, the American male is increasingly turning to physical optimization as a form of existential insurance. Historical trends show that after a divorce, men typically fall into one of two physiological categories: the sedentary decline or the radical transformation. James represents the latter, part of a growing case study of men who use the trauma of separation as the ultimate pre-workout. To understand why this shift is so profound, we have to look at the state of James's body when he began this journey. Years of high-stress project management and the emotional meat grinder of a contested divorce had left him with what clinicians call the cortisol belly. Stress-induced hypercortisolism leads to visceral fat accumulation, which is not just an aesthetic issue. It is a hormonal disaster that further lowers testosterone and increases systemic inflammation. The reclamation begins with the blood panel. In the 2026 healthcare landscape, forward-thinking men are bypassing the standard physical and moving straight to comprehensive biomarker analysis. James sits in a sterile clinic in downtown Columbus as a technician draws 6 vials of blood. He is looking for more than just cholesterol levels. He is looking at his free testosterone, his DHS, his C-reactive protein, and his fasting insulin. The data comes back as a wake-up call. At 41, James has the hormonal profile of a man 65. His body has been in a state of chronic fight or flight for so long that his endocrine system has essentially begun to shut down non-essential functions, like muscle protein synthesis and libido. Potential outcomes for men in this state involve a step-by-step rebuilding of the foundation. The first step is the management of the stress response. In the year 2026, this often involves the use of wearable technology that tracks heart rate variability, or HRV, in real time. James starts wearing a sleek, screenless ring that syncs with his phone, providing him with a recovery score every morning. He learns that the nights he spends ruminating on legal documents or scrolling through his ex-spouse's social media result in a nosedive in his HRV, meaning his nervous system is unable to recover. He begins to treat his sleep as a non-negotiable legal obligation. He blacks out his bedroom, sets the temperature to 65 degrees, and uses magnesium glycinate and L-theanine to force his brain into a state of deep, restorative rest. Then comes the resistance training. Imagine James standing in front of a squat rack. The weight on the bar is a tangible, honest problem. Unlike the complexities of family court or the nuances of co-parenting, the weight either moves or it doesn't. There is a profound psychological release in the simplicity of physical struggle. As James begins a regimen of heavy compound movements, squats, deadlifts, and overhead presses, he is doing more than building a revenge physique. He is re-establishing a sense of agency. Every repetition is a vote for the version of himself that can handle a heavy load. Case studies from U.S. sports psychologists in 2026 suggest that for divorced men, the gym serves as a surrogate for the home they lost. It is a space where they have total control, where the results are directly proportional to the effort invested. We must also discuss the role of nutrition as a tool of war. James abandons the processed, convenience-driven diet of his marriage years. He moves to a high-protein, nutrient-dense protocol focused on micronutrient density. In 2026, the trend of continuous glucose monitoring has gone mainstream for non-diabetics. James wears a small patch on his tricep that tracks how his blood sugar reacts to every meal. He realizes that the mid-afternoon energy crashes he thought were just aging were actually blood sugar spikes from his stress-driven snacking. By stabilizing his insulin, he stabilizes his mood. He finds that he is less reactive during mediation sessions, less prone to the sudden bursts of anger or despair that characterize the post-divorce experience. Historical trends in the United States have seen a massive surge in what is known as the longevity economy. For James, this includes a careful, medically supervised conversation about hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. In 2026, the stigma around testosterone optimization has largely evaporated among the divorced male demographic. Under the supervision of a licensed physician, James explores how optimizing his hormonal levels can help counteract the biological aging accelerated by his divorce. It is not about a quick fix. It is about returning his body to a baseline where he can actually compete in the world again. Potential outcomes of this optimization include improved cognitive clarity, faster physical recovery, and a renewed sense of drive that had been missing for a decade. Consider the social impact of this transformation. As James's body begins to change, as his shoulders broaden and his jawline sharpens, the way the world interacts with him changes. This is the biological reclamation in action. In the gym, he finds a new tribe. These are men who don't care about his divorce or his job title. They care about his work ethic. He finds himself in a community of brothers who are all, in one way or another, rebuilding themselves from the wreckage of their previous lives. The gym becomes his new social headquarters, a place where vulnerability is expressed through shared physical suffering rather than words. By mid-2026, James is a different animal. He has dropped 30 pounds of fat and added 15 pounds of muscle, but the real change is in his eyes. The haunted, hollow look of the early divorce days has been replaced by a sharp, predatory focus. He has reclaimed his health, but in doing so, he has realized something even more important. The physical body was just the first layer of the defense. Now that he has the energy and the clarity, he looks at his career and his bank account with a new perspective. He realizes that the project management job he has held for 15 years is a relic of his old life. It is a job designed for a man who needed stability above all else. But the new James is no longer seeking stability. He is seeking growth. The biological reclamation has provided James with the engine, but he still needs a destination. He has the strength to carry the weight, but he needs to decide where he is taking it. As he leaves the training center, he feels a sense of power he hasn't felt since his early 20s. He is ready to rebuild not just his body but his entire mission. However, as he steps back into the corporate world, he realizes that his new energy is making him a misfit in his old cubicle. The cultural shifts that broke his marriage are the same ones currently destabilizing the American workplace. How does a man with a renewed sense of vitality and a cleared-out life navigate a professional landscape that is being hollowed out by automation and shifting social contracts? What happens when the divorced man decides to stop being an employee and start being an architect of his own economy? In the next part of this masterclass, we are diving into the professional pivot. We will explore the rise of the solo entrepreneur in the post-divorce landscape, the strategic use of liquidation to fund new ventures, and why a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person in the boardroom. The reclamation is moving from the gym to the ledger. We are going to work next. James returns to his cubicle on a rainy Tuesday morning in Seattle, but the man sitting in that chair is no longer the man who occupied it 6 months ago. The psychological and physical transformation we have tracked has finally reached the one place where James spent the majority of his adult life: his professional identity. In the United States of 2026, The corporate structure is built on the assumption of a stable, predictable employee. Historically, the most desirable employee for a large-scale firm was a married man with a mortgage and 2 children. This man was seen as reliable because he was trapped. He was a captive of his own responsibilities. He could not afford to take risks, he could not afford to speak his mind, and he certainly could not afford to walk away. However, as James stares at his project management software, he realizes the leverage his employer once held over him has evaporated. The divorce, in all its brutality, has gifted him with a terrifying form of freedom. This is what we call the professional pivot. In 2026, we are seeing a massive historical trend of divorced men exiting the traditional workforce to enter the world of high-stakes solo entrepreneurship or specialized consulting. When you have already seen your house sold and your retirement account halved, the threat of a performance review loses its sting. James is now a man with a vastly reduced cost of living and zero desire to climb a ladder that leads to a roof he no longer owns. Let us look at the case study of the strategic liquidation. James had $150,000 left after the sale of the family home and the division of assets. In the traditional playbook, a man in his 40s would be advised to put that money into a safe, low-yield index fund and begin the slow, 20-year crawl back to financial solvency. But James looks at the 2026 economy and sees a different potential outcome. He sees an economy where AI has made traditional middle management obsolete, and where specialized, agile consultants are the new power players. James decides to use $50,000 of his remaining capital as a war chest to launch a niche logistics consultancy, leveraging 20 years of industry knowledge. Imagine the scenario if James had stayed. He would be competing for a director-level role against 25-year-olds who have no children and infinite time. He would be operating from a place of scarcity, terrified of the next round of layoffs. By pivoting, James moves from being a defensive player to an offensive one. He realizes that a man who lives in a 2-bedroom apartment and drives a used vehicle has a lower financial overhead than almost any of his peers. This lower burn rate is his competitive advantage. He can afford to be bold in his pricing, aggressive in his networking, and uncompromising in his vision. In the year 2026, the United States is witnessing the rise of the mercenary class. These are men who have undergone the social and financial liquidation of divorce and emerged as highly efficient, independent economic units. They are not looking for a work family, they are looking for a contract. James spends his evenings not in front of the television, but in deep work building his own brand. The discipline he cultivated in the gym during his biological reclamation now transfers to his professional life. He treats his business like he treats his deadlift. He focuses on the fundamentals, tracks every metric, and pushes through the plateaus. The step-by-step process of this pivot is meticulous. Step 1 is the audit of skills. James realizes that his value wasn't the company he worked for, but the problems he knew how to solve. Step 2 is the reduction of liability. He minimizes his personal expenses to the absolute baseline, giving himself a 2-year runway. Step 3 is the brand construction. In the 2026 digital economy, James understands that his professional reputation must be decoupled from his employer. He begins publishing high-level white papers on logistics automation, positioning himself as an authority in a world of generalists. This leads to a fascinating shift in the boardroom. When James goes into a negotiation now, he is the most dangerous person in the room. Why? Because he doesn't need the deal. The desperate man is always the one who loses the negotiation. James, with his reclaimed health and his simplified life, exudes a level of calm confidence that is magnetic to high-value clients. He is no longer asking for a salary. He is offering a solution. Historical trends indicate that men who make this shift post-divorce often see a total income recovery within 3 to 5 years, but with a drastically higher quality of life because they own their time. We must also address the psychological impact of the nothing left to lose mindset. For James, the worst-case scenario has already happened. He has already lost the family unit, the primary residence, and the social standing. This creates a psychological floor. He knows he can survive on very little. This lack of fear makes him a formidable competitor. While his colleagues are playing it safe to protect their suburban status, James is taking calculated risks that have the potential for asymmetrical returns. He is investing in his own education, learning the latest AI integrations for his field, and building a global network of peers who are also operating outside the traditional corporate cage. However, the professional pivot is not without its risks. Case studies from the U.S. Department of Labor in 2026 show that the transition from employee to entrepreneur is a primary source of stress for men who do not have a solid support system. Without the structure of a 9-to-5, some men fall back into the isolation we discussed in Part 3. James avoids this by joining a mastermind group of other solo consultants. This becomes his new professional tribe. They don't talk about their ex-wives, they talk about market trends, lead generation, and tax optimization strategies. They provide the accountability that the corporate HR department used to provide, but without the surveillance. By the end of 2026, James's consultancy is generating more revenue than his previous salary. He is working 40 hours a week, but 30 of those hours are on his own terms. He has successfully navigated the financial reset not by trying to rebuild the old house, but by building a new, more resilient fortress. He has realized that the American dream of 1950 was a trap for the man of 2026. The new dream is not about the picket fence. It is about the autonomy of the individual. James has reclaimed his body, his mind, and his money. He has a new tribe and a new mission. He looks at the world with a clarity he hasn't had since he was a teenager. But as he stands in his office, looking at his growing balance sheet, a new question begins to haunt him. He has built a successful life for one. He has proven he can survive and thrive alone. But as he looks at his children during his 50-50 weeks, he wonders about the world they are growing into. He wonders about the values he is passing down. He has mastered the art of the pivot, but has he mastered the art of the legacy? He begins to realize that being a successful solo entrepreneur is only a means to an end. The final stage of his transformation isn't about what he can earn. It is about what he can leave behind. He starts to look at the legal system that broke him and the culture that misled him, not with bitterness, but with a desire to change the narrative for the next generation. In the next part of this masterclass, we are exploring the advocacy awakening. We will look at the growing movement of men in the U.S. who are working to reform family law, the rise of fatherhood first mentorship, and how the divorced man becomes a guardian of the future. The project manager is about to become a philosopher. We are going to the town square next. The town square of 2026 is not a physical plaza with a stone podium. It is a decentralized network of digital forums, local legislative hearing rooms, and community mentorship circles where the silence of the American male is finally being broken. As James looks at his thriving consultancy and his physically reclaimed self, he realizes that his individual victory is hollow if the path remains just as treacherous for those following behind him. This is the stage of the advocacy awakening. It is the moment when the divorced man moves from a state of personal survival to a state of collective responsibility. Historically, men in the United States have handled divorce in isolation, often disappearing into their work or their vices. But in 2026, a new historical trend is emerging: the rise of the intentional advocate. Imagine a man named Brian. Brian is 32 years old, living in a tech hub like Raleigh, North Carolina. He is in the early stages of a high-conflict separation, and he is terrified. He is where James was 2 years ago, confronting a legal system that feels like a labyrinth designed to extract his wealth and dilute his fatherhood. In the old world, Brian would have had to rely on expensive billable hours from an attorney to understand the landscape. In the 2026 landscape, Brian finds James. James has joined a movement known as Fatherhood First, a mentorship network that provides peer-to-peer guidance on the sociological and logistical realities of divorce. James sits down with Brian in a quiet corner of a local library. This is the first step in the advocacy process, the mentorship of the next generation. James doesn't give Brian legal advice, as he is not an attorney. Instead, he provides him with a framework for emotional and tactical resilience. He explains the case study of the 2026 custody landscape, where the push for a rebuttable presumption of equal shared parenting has finally gained significant traction in over 30 U.S. states. He shows Brian how to use co-parenting software not just as a scheduling tool, but as a neutral ledger of his commitment and presence. This is the step-by-step transfer of wisdom. James is teaching Brian how to be a professional in a process that is designed to make him emotional. The advocacy awakening also involves a deep dive into the legislative shifts of 2026. For decades, U.S. family law was governed by the best interests of the child standard, which, while well-intentioned, was often applied through the lens of outdated gender roles. James becomes involved in local advocacy groups that are working to modernize these standards. They are presenting data to state legislatures showing that children with two actively involved parents have significantly better potential outcomes in terms of academic performance, mental health, and future relationship stability. James uses his skills as a project manager to organize these data points into compelling presentations for policymakers. He is no longer just a victim of the law. He is an architect of its evolution. Historical trends in the U.S. show that the most effective legal reforms often come from those who have been through the fire. James attends a town hall meeting where the topic is the reform of spousal support guidelines. He listens as young men and women express their desire for a system that reflects the dual income reality of the modern American household. James speaks up, not with bitterness, but with the authority of a man who has seen both sides of the coin. He argues for a system that prioritizes the rehabilitation of both parties, rather than the long-term dependency of one. This is the shift from private pain to public policy. Consider the case study of the community support model. In 2026, we see a surge in men's centers that mirror the support structures that have existed for women for decades. James helps fund and organize a local chapter that offers workshops on everything from emotional intelligence to single-parent meal prepping. The goal is to counteract the loneliness epidemic we discussed in Part 3. By creating a physical space where men can gather without the pressure of the digital meat market, James is rebuilding the social fabric of his community. He is creating a tribe that is defined by its virtues rather than its losses. The step-by-step evolution of James's advocacy starts with the one-on-one. This is the mentorship of Brian and others like him. It then moves to the local level, where James participates in school board meetings to ensure that the rights of non-custodial parents are respected in terms of access to educational records and school events. In 2026, many school districts still have administrative hurdles that make it difficult for divorced fathers to stay in the loop. James works to streamline these processes, using his professional expertise to propose digital solutions that benefit all parents. Finally, the advocacy reaches the cultural level. James begins to contribute to the larger conversation about what it means to be a man in America after the collapse of the traditional nuclear family. He challenges the narrative that a divorced man is a broken man. He uses his own life as a case study to show that the end of a marriage can be the beginning of a more intentional, high-impact phase of life. He talks about the concept of the new guardian, a man who protects his children's future by being a stable, healthy, and engaged presence, regardless of his marital status. In the year 2026, the United States is at a tipping point. The old models of family and masculinity have been disrupted by economic and cultural shifts, but the new models are still being built. James realizes that he is a builder. He looks at his children and sees that his advocacy is not just for Brian, or for the men in his mentorship group. It is for them. He is working to create a world where, if they ever face the challenges he did, the path will be clearer, the support will be stronger, and the system will be fairer. However, as James becomes more involved in this public work, he starts to notice a deeper change within himself. The physical strength from the gym and the financial success from his business are the tools, and the advocacy is the mission, but there is still a quiet space in his mind that is searching for something more profound. He has mastered the external world, but he is beginning to realize that the ultimate reclamation isn't found in a ledger or a legislative bill. He starts to wonder about the quiet moments, the ones where the advocacy is over and the children are at their mother's house. He realizes that he has spent 2 years running, first from the pain, then toward the gym, then toward his business, and finally toward his mission. But what happens when he stops running? What is left in the silence of that 2-bedroom apartment when the man is finally at peace with himself? In the next part of this masterclass, we are exploring the philosophical anchoring. We will look at the rise of modern stoicism in the divorced male community, the search for meaning beyond the provider role, and how a man builds an internal fortress that no court can ever touch. We are going inside the mind one last time. The vacuum of silence that once terrified James in his 1-bedroom apartment has undergone a fundamental transformation by the autumn of 2026. It is no longer a hollow space filled with the echoes of what he lost. It has become a laboratory for the construction of the internal fortress. This is the stage of philosophical anchoring, a process that is becoming a survival necessity for the modern American male. Historically, the U.S. identity for men was built on external scaffolding. The title on the business card, the size of the suburban lawn, and the social status of the marriage. When the cultural shifts of the last decade kicked that scaffolding away, millions of men were left in a state of psychological freefall. James has spent the last 2 years realizing that if your happiness is dependent on things that can be taken away by a court of law, a market crash, or a swipe on a dating app, then you are not a man. You are a hostage. In 2026, we are seeing a massive historical trend toward the revival of Stoic philosophy among divorced men in major U.S. cities. This is not the pop culture version of Stoicism that means being emotionless. It is the rigorous, practical application of the dichotomy of control. James sits at his desk and opens a leather-bound journal. He practiced this today during a difficult co-parenting exchange. The potential outcomes of that interaction could have been a 3-day spiral of resentment. Instead, James applied the first rule of the internal fortress. Identify what is within your control and what is not. He cannot control his ex-spouse's tone of voice. He cannot control the legal precedents of his state. He cannot control the opinions of his former in-laws. He can only control his own objective judgment, his own unselfish action, and his own disciplined desire. This shift represents a total exit from the utility trap. For his entire adult life, James was taught that his value was a function of his utility to others. He was a provider of money, a provider of security, and a provider of labor. In the 2026 cultural landscape, where those roles have been disrupted, James has had to find a new center of gravity. He is learning to find meaning in being rather than just doing. Case studies from psychological wellness centers in Austin and Denver show that men who successfully navigate the post-divorce identity crisis are those who transition from a performance-based identity to a virtue-based identity. James no longer asks if he is successful by the standards of the Columbus Country Club. He asks if he is acting with justice, temperance, courage, and wisdom. Imagine a scenario where a man is faced with a sudden, unexpected setback. It is late 2026, and the logistics industry faces a massive AI-driven disruption that threatens James's new consultancy. In his old life, this would have been a catastrophe of identity. He would have felt like a failure as a man because his ability to provide was under fire. But the James of Part 9 has an internal fortress. He views the market shift not as a personal assault, but as a neutral external event. He does not add a second story of suffering to the initial problem. He looks at the data, adjusts his strategy, and maintains his internal equilibrium. This is the potential outcome of a man who has anchored himself in philosophy. He becomes unshakable because his foundation is not made of paper assets or social approval. The step-by-step construction of this internal fortress begins with the practice of premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. James spends 5 minutes every morning visualizing the potential challenges of the day. He imagines the difficult client call, the car trouble, or the missed weekend with his children. By inviting these possibilities into his mind in a controlled environment, he strips them of their power to surprise and overwhelm him. This historical trend of negative visualization is helping men in 2026 reduce their baseline anxiety levels, as it prepares the mind for the reality of a volatile world. Step 2 is the cultivation of the objective I. James has learned to strip away the emotional labels he used to attach to events. A divorce is no longer a betrayal. It is the dissolution of a legal contract. A loss of a friend is not an abandonment. It is a natural social pruning. By describing events in plain, unadorned language, James prevents his mind from creating the narratives of victimhood that keep so many men stuck in the past. He is no longer a man who was wronged. He is a man who is experiencing a transition. Step 3 is the practice of voluntary hardship. Despite his financial recovery, James intentionally chooses moments of discomfort. He takes cold showers, he fasts periodically, and he pushes himself to the limit in the gym. This is not about self-punishment. It is about proving to himself that he can endure and thrive regardless of his external circumstances. In 2026, this rejection of the comfort-driven American lifestyle is a radical act of reclamation. It builds a level of grit that makes the minor annoyances of modern life seem insignificant. This philosophical anchoring fundamentally changes James's parenting. He is no longer trying to buy his children's affection with toys or vacations to compensate for the divorce. Instead, he is teaching them the virtues of resilience and self-reliance. He is showing them, through his own example, how to handle disappointment with grace and how to build a life of purpose. He has moved from being the provider of things to being the mentor of character. This is the highest form of legacy. In a U.S. culture that is increasingly fragmented and reactive, James is raising children who have their own internal compasses, guided by the man who refused to stay broken. The historical trend suggests that this movement toward philosophical grounding is not a temporary fad. It is a structural response to a society that has become hypercomplex and emotionally taxing. For the divorced man in America, philosophy is the bridge between the wreckage of the old world and the potential of the new one. James looks in the mirror and sees a man who is leaner, wealthier, and more influential than he was in part 1, but those are just the side effects. The real achievement is the calm. The real victory is the silence that no longer needs to be filled with noise. He has rebuilt his body, reclaimed his time, redefined his career, and anchored his soul. He has moved from the parking lot handoff of part 4 to a state of self-governance that most men never achieve in a lifetime of marriage. He is a man who has integrated the lessons of the collapse into a new, superior architecture. He is a modern American man who has survived the death of the old dream and is now standing on the threshold of a new reality. But there is one final piece to the puzzle. James has transformed himself, but he still lives in a world that is largely unaware of this new blueprint. He has the internal fortress, but he must now decide how he will interact with the broader society from this position of strength. The journey from the crisis of part 1 to the peace of part 9 has been a deep dive into the self, but the final part of this masterclass is about the return. How does this new man, this philosopher-entrepreneur, this guardian father, lead in a world that is still searching for a way forward? In the final part of our series, we are bringing it all together into the 2026 blueprint for the sovereign man. We will explore the final synthesis of health, wealth, and wisdom, and the ultimate promise of the life that lies beyond the divorce. The masterclass concludes with the vision of the future. We are finishing the work next. The transition from a man who is being processed by a system to a man who is the architect of his own reality is the final, most critical evolution in the year 2026. James stands at the window of his new office space, overlooking the city he once felt alienated from. He is no longer the victim of part 1, the financial casualty of part 2, or the social ghost of part 3. He has successfully integrated the biological, professional, and philosophical lessons of this journey into a singular, cohesive framework, the blueprint of the sovereign man. In the United States, we have reached a cultural tipping point where the old, rigid expectations of male identity have failed so spectacularly that they have cleared the ground for a new, more resilient way of being. This final part of our deep dive is the synthesis of health, wealth, and wisdom into a lifestyle that is not merely post-divorce, but post-fragility. To understand the sovereign man of 2026, we must look at the first pillar of the blueprint: integrated autonomy. Historically, American men were raised to be interdependent to a fault, dependent on a corporation for income, a wife for social life, and a system for identity. James has replaced this with a decentralized life. His income is no longer tied to a single employer, but to a diversified portfolio of clients and assets. His social life is no longer a proxy of his marriage, but a curated circle of brothers and mentors. His health is no longer a secondary concern, but the primary engine of his cognitive and emotional performance. Potential outcomes for men who achieve this level of integration include a near-total immunity to the midlife crises that decimated previous generations. Because their foundation is internal and diversified, no single external shock can bring the whole structure down. Let us examine the case study of James's re-entry into the world of partnership. It is late 2026, and James has met a woman named Sarah. In his old life, James would have approached this relationship from a place of emotional hunger and societal expectation. He would have been looking for someone to fill the holes in his life, to be his social secretary, his emotional anchor, and his domestic manager. But the James of part 10 is sovereign. He does not need Sarah to define him. He invites her to share in the life he has already built. This is the 2026 relationship paradigm: the intentional partnership. Historical trends show that men who have undergone this deep dive transformation are moving away from traditional, default marriage structures toward highly customized, contract-based unions. James and Sarah have discussed their values, their financial boundaries, and their personal missions with a level of transparency that was unthinkable in 2008. They are not merging two halves to make a whole. They are two whole individuals choosing to travel in the same direction for as long as it remains mutually beneficial. The second pillar of the blueprint is the legacy of the anti-fragile. James looks at his children, not with the guilt of a man who broke their home, but with the pride of a man who showed them how to build a better one. He realized that the greatest gift he could give his son and daughter was the sight of a father who could be knocked down by life and stand back up stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. In 2026, the cultural shift in parenting is moving away from the participation trophy era toward a focus on resilience and character. James teaches his son that his value is self-generated. He teaches his daughter that her father is a man of his word, a man who respects himself, and a man who cannot be manipulated by emotional volatility. The step-by-step transmission of these values happens in the quiet moments, over a chess match, during a hike, or while working on a project together. This is how James ensures that the cycle of systemic fragility ends with him. We must also look at the economic reality of the sovereign man in 2026. James has moved beyond the work-life balance myth and into work-life integration. Because he owns his time, he can be a more present father during his 50-50 weeks than he ever was when he lived in the same house full-time. He has optimized his business to run with high-level AI automation, allowing him to focus on the deep-thinking tasks that drive the most value. Case studies from the U.S. labor market indicate that men who pivot to this solopreneur model post-divorce often report a 40% increase in overall life satisfaction, despite the initial financial hit of the asset split. They have traded the illusion of corporate security for the reality of personal capability. The third pillar is the global perspective. In 2026, the sovereign man is not restricted by his local geography. James has leveraged the digital tools we discussed in earlier parts to build a global network. He is no longer just a man from Ohio. He is a man of the world. He understands that cultural shifts are happening everywhere, and by staying connected to international trends in technology, philosophy, and health, he stays ahead of the curve. He has built what we call a portable identity. Whether he is in Seattle, Lisbon, or Tokyo, he carries his gym habits, his philosophical discipline, and his professional authority with him. He is no longer tethered to a specific suburban identity that can be revoked by a local court. As we conclude this masterclass, imagine the final step-by-step ritual of James's day. He wakes up at 5 a.m. not because he has to, but because he chooses to own the first hours of the day. He trains his body, feeds his mind with the Stoic texts of Part 9, and reviews his business metrics. He spends his morning in high-impact work and his afternoon with his children fully present, without the distraction of a failing marriage or a corporate master. In the evening, he reflects on his progress. He is at peace with his past. He looks at his ex-spouse with a sense of neutral goodwill, recognizing that the conflict was the catalyst for his growth. He looks at the legal system with the detached interest of an advocate who is working to change it. Most importantly, he looks at the future with a sense of excitement. The promise of the 2026 blueprint is not a life without pain, but a life where pain is the fuel for evolution. We have seen the historical trends that suggest the old social contract is dead, but James is the evidence that something far more powerful can be built in its place. The silent epidemic of male loneliness and despair in America has a cure, and that cure is the radical reclamation of the self. You have followed this deep dive from the initial trauma to the final synthesis. You have seen the case studies of financial resets, social liquidations, and biological revolutions. You now hold the blueprint in your hands. The American male in 2026 is at a crossroads. One path leads back to the resentment, the isolation, and the stagnation of the victim mindset. The other path, the one James chose, leads to sovereignty. It is a path of high discipline, high stakes, and high rewards. It requires you to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner of your own weaknesses. It requires you to build an internal fortress that is so strong, so grounded in virtue, and so resilient that the storms of culture can only serve to wash away the dust from its walls. As we close this 10-part masterclass, the question is no longer about what the world will do to you. The question is what you will do with the world. You have the health, you have the strategy for wealth, and you have the philosophical anchor. The 2026 sovereign man is not a myth. He is a potential outcome for any man willing to do the work. The cycle of Part 1 to Part 10 is complete, but for you the real work is just beginning. The legacy you build from this moment forward will be the true measure of the cultural shift. It is time to step out of the wreckage and into the light of your own creation. The blueprint is yours. Now go build.